There we go. God, we just thank you for opportunity to connect over something like Zoom and see each other, via technology while we're separated physically. It allows opportunities for people in other places, like in Philly, to be able to jump in with us too, which is cool. But help us to just have some really good dialogue and to dream and spark our minds with creativity, and help us to just support each other, encourage each other. And if we feel led at the end of today's conversation and next week to form something, start something, that we just continue this journey together, and that we'd see you do some really spectacular things. So we love you, and we thank you that you love us first. We'll talk to you later. Amen. So I'm going to start off. Oh, here come Kelsey and Fletcher. Okay, I'm going to start off with asking a question. And like I said, I want this to be highly interactive. And so also use the chat. I believe chat is enabled. It should be. Tell me if it's not.
Mike, are we able to talk, or should we mute ourselves?
Yeah, you will be talking, but mute yourself until you do.
Okay.
Sound good?
Sounds good.
Awesome. And are you guys able to use the chat box here? Sweet, it's working. Beautiful. Okay. So chat box your questions or different things that you'd like me to address as we go, and we'll try to get to them. Probably won't get to everything today. I'm going to start off with the question of, we say that we're a missional church and that we want to be on the mission of Jesus in the world. And so I'm going to ask a very open-ended question of, what is the mission? Because I think if we get that wrong, we could effectively do things that we aren't really supposed to be going after. We could hit the wrong target. All right, so what is the mission? Unmute yourself to participate. What I'm going to do now as well is put up a whiteboard and jot down some of your thoughts. Here we go. What is the mission?
To make disciples. That's what Jesus said.
Make disciples. Okay. Yep, to love others, bring them into a closer relationship with God. Okay. Yep. Hold on. I have to exit. I'm going to ask you to speak instead of chat during this time, because I can't switch back and forth easily there. So make disciples, and we have love others. What else?
Grow in our faith together and serve others.
Grow, serve. Okay.
To see people who are far from God come to know Him, and then grow into fully and faithful followers of Christ.
What was the last part?
And see those people become fully and faithfully following Christ.
I think it's important to admit our shortcomings and talk about forgiveness. So say, like, I'm so far from perfect, and that's okay, because I have an amazing God who loves me as I am. And I want to grow and become better because He loves me, not to make Him love me.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think we also have to be led by the Spirit, and remember that it's not us.
Spirit led. Okay.
I'd say helping to bring everything under the lordship of Jesus.
Okay.
You know, that's a hard question. I mean, I could give you a billion different answers, but I don't have one answer for that.
I think that's pretty much the Great Commission.
Mm-hmm.
I'll
Yep.
have to
You
think
have.
about that for a little-
Was said.
I will have to think about that for a little bit.
Good. Good. So I love this. Make disciples to the ends of the earth. Yeah. And under that large umbrella of want to make disciples who make disciples to the ends of the earth. We have to love people. And if we love them, we're going to seek that they flourish and become who God created them to be, just growth. And they're going to care about other people, serve people. We want to see people that are far from God come to know him. Yeah, people naturally share what they enjoy, right? So if I'm enjoying grace and freedom and who Jesus is and find my purpose in him, I want to pass on what I'm enjoying with the people that I care about. And then we want to see them become faithful followers of Christ. Culture of grace, humility. Yeah, Christians really should be the chief confessors. Absolutely. Spirit-led. Without the Spirit, we're not going to go very far. That's for sure. That is for sure. Bring everything under the lordship of Jesus. I think it's a good point to say, if Jesus's prayer was on earth as it is in heaven, right? That he wants to see basically everything here be perfectly restored to what it was meant to be, sort of Chronicles of Narnia, the Beast Castle. You see total restoration and transformation of all that is broken in the world, people and places. That we care for this broken world and people who are experiencing the brokenness of this world. Now, what that does is it causes us to say, we want to care for people spiritually. We want to see people find their ultimate purpose in a relationship with God, right? Thumbs up. You can use the reactions. Thumbs up, clap. Yes, I like it. We want to see people find their ultimate purpose in relationship with God. We also want to see relationships healed. We want to see forgiveness. We want to see reconciliation where there's separation. We want to see
Think you're frozen, Mike.
no. That was no good.
You're like a robot.
Uh-oh.
I was like trying to figure out if everybody else thought he was frozen too. And then
Me too. Me too.
everyone's reactions was like,
Yeah, sorry guys. I just switched my I have two different internet connections. I switched to the other one now. Hopefully we're good. So yeah, if you think of mission really as God's bigger mission to restore all people and all places, you want to see them spiritually, physically, relationally restored. And what that does is it sort of opens up the creative avenues in your mind of saying, ultimately, it isn't just a piece of, hold on. Oh, there's someone that needs the link. I'm sorry. Yep. 1 second, guys. We've got someone out of the meeting that needs into the meeting. Okay. There we go, sent. All right, my ADD is in overdrive. So we want to see everything that's broken, restored, people, places, things. So it opens up creative elements in your mind where you say, what if Jesus was to move into my home and live in my neighborhood, what would happen to my neighborhood? What would happen to my neighborhood? What would happen to my block?
It would be really awesome.
It'd be really awesome.
There'd be lots of parties. Probably a big block party.
Uh-huh.
I think you'd be like family with your neighbors.
Party, family. What else would happen to your
Yeah,
neighborhood?
I really think that idea of like family, community, you know, it's what Jesus created when he was here, you know, with his quote unquote disciples. You know, it's just where they were kind of sharing this journey together. Although, you know, his path was a little bit different than the rest of them, but it was.
I think we'd see the fruits of the Spirit really start to flourish and beyond just ourselves.
Uh-huh. Yep. I love the journey together piece too, and saying that Jesus invited people to walk with him, follow him, even before they really understood what they were in for. He treated them like insiders from day one. Like, come, follow me. And 3 years later, when he's going to the cross, did they really totally understand what he was doing? I would say not, because they all looked pretty darn hopeless, didn't they? Pretty darn hopeless, locked in a room, terrified, thinking that all hope was gone. And so Jesus invited these people to walk with him even before they believed, and treated them like family, partied with them, served with them, discipled them even before they got it, right? We call it pre-conversion disciple making. Really, the idea is you disciple everyone. You share good news with everyone. You invite everyone along on this journey where you, as they have needs, you meet them. Where they need hope, you speak hope into those needs. When they need community help, support, they're there. So I think of things like people in my neighborhood who are lonely. What happens if Jesus moves in to the neighborhood? You've got a friend in me, right? Like you got a friend, someone who cares about the outcast and the broken, and those who are alone and isolated suddenly have community and relationship and friendship. What about people that are sick? What happens when Jesus moves into the neighborhood?
He healed them.
He heals them. Absolutely. Right? Someone's hurting and they're going through a difficult time. What happens if Jesus moves into the neighborhood?
They're supported and comforted.
Absolutely. Supported, comforted, loved, listened to. Yeah, super good. So I think it's really critical that we start to imagine mission not through a lens of, and I think a lot of people have this idea that mission is sort of like we are people are like a project and you're trying to get them to pray a prayer. And that's mission, is that we go out and we try to give people a sales pitch and then get them to come into a church group. and then they can wait to die. And then along the way, we try to like make them very moral instead of what does it look like if God's kingdom comes in Enola, Harrisburg, Camp Hill, Marysville, Lebanon, Philly, as it is in heaven. And when our imaginations start to go in that direction, it is a entirely different ballgame. Entirely different ballgame. So what are you feeling as I say that? I'd like to hear some responses to that before I move on. It's good to sort of pause with that for a minute.
So, Mike, I guess I have a question, because I think sometimes we can get so caught up in the grandiose version of what the kingdom looks like that we can get very disappointed with the reality of where we're at right now. So how do we engage in a forward motion with kingdom purpose while also not allowing ourselves to create false expectations or false metrics, I guess? Am I making? I don't know if I'm making sense with my question.
Yeah, you're making sense. I think one of the things we like to say a lot is high call, low expectation. And that's something that has become like a mantra for us, is high call, low expectation. So you see this in the teachings of Jesus when he's saying things like, my kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, and he's praying for those sorts of things. But you also see it when people come to him, and he never tells people to improve, ever. You never see Jesus telling people to improve. But you see Jesus telling people to be perfect, which is impossible. They can't be, right? So every time people come to Jesus, he goes, you must be perfect. Go and never sin again. You must be holy as I am holy. Now, what does that do? Well, it causes all of us to go, oh, crap. Like, I can't do that. I'm totally screwed. And then Jesus says, that's okay. I pick up the tab. You're free. You're forgiven. You're whole in me. Like, it's all covered. It's grace. It's forgiveness. So what Jesus does is he gives people grace that they can't refuse. Think about the woman at the adulterous woman. Grace that you can't refuse with the commands that you can't keep, which takes you back to grace that you can't refuse. So it's always, I'm calling you to this perfect life and perfect relationships and perfect community and healing and restoration of the world, because ultimately that's beautiful. We want to see everyone loving each other, serving each other, caring for each other, the world restored, healthy dynamics, forgiveness and reconciliation. Those are things that we strive for. But at the same time, we recognize that at the end of the day, we're broken, flawed sinners. And not just the people that we're on mission to, but even more so us, where Paul says, I'm the chief of that, right? Like, those people are messed up. I'm even more messed up than the people I'm going to. And I think when we come with that humility, as Danielle said, we run out saying, I would love to see everything that is broken healed. But along the way, I sort of expect that there's going to be mess and disappointment and brokenness, because there is in me, right? Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Other thoughts and feedback to that first little section about what is the mission?
I just, again, adding more to some of the stuff you were saying, it was, a lot of times, self-awareness, you're talking about the, understanding who we are, and viewing ourselves correctly, through the light of Jesus' teachings and what the Bible tells us about ourselves. if we don't start from that place, then, the mission is not going to be what Jesus, wanted it to be. If we put ourselves on a pedestal higher than what we actually are, then, when it comes time to have compassion and love and humility towards others, it's not going to come naturally. It's just, I think that's an important place to start as far as, what the mission is. It's
I think that's a good point.
yeah,
I was
begins
thinking,
here in our heart before it can be outward.
well, I was actually just thinking too, like, I mean, when we're talking about growing in our faith and helping others in that journey as well, like we are going to continue to be growing, like in all aspects of our faith. So that's a good point that you bring up, because I was sitting there questioning, like, I mean, I question where I'm at in my journey right now, but it's like, if you say that every single time, you're never, the more people you bring together, you do it together and you're growing together. So I think that's a really good point, Omar.
Yeah, there is this beauty of we are ultimately like messed up people inviting people to walk with us as we walk with Jesus, just like Paul said. I mean, if you look at someone who goes, I'm the chief of sinners, I'm the least likely to be called an apostle. And then you start looking through all the people throughout scripture who God uses. They're very messed up people, incredibly messed up people. I almost feel like God chose them because they were messed up, so that we would all go, oh, I can be used too. That's cool. You've got polygamous, murderer, very impulsive, angry type of issues. And God continues to use unlikely people who simply admit their inability and brokenness, and God says, okay, that's what I like. That's what I like, is God be merciful to me, a sinner, beating his chest in the temple. I'm just a total screw up. God says, cool, I can work with that. The other guy, like this week, I totally rocked it. We had 4 Bible studies and gave a whole bunch of tithes and offerings, did this, that, and the other. And God's like, nah, that's totally not cool. You're very cocky. You need to understand your own inability and struggle. And so I think the posture, Erica, Omar, I think that posture of humility and inability, and the fact that we need the grace of God, that has to be a posture that we go out with. It's just so good.
Also, back to the question, I think with everything going on, hope for everybody coming in. Some people feel like everything's so hopeless right now.
Absolutely. We need some good news, don't we? People need to hear good news, hope.
Mike, the other thing I was going to say in reference to the conversation you were just having is I remember at one point you were talking about the importance of confession. And I think it is really important to be able to confess to others your failings, because I know with those of us at Sozo that have been part of the church for a long time, I think that sometimes there's a divide, sort of a cultural divide between us and those who have not been a part of the church. And they need to see that we truly are human and we fail and all that kind of stuff. I think that's important to our relationship with them.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the language of Christians should be the chief confessors. Confession and humility is incredibly disarming. And at the end of the day, the gospel frees us from the need to pretend that we're impressive. I'll say that again. The gospel frees us from the need to pretend that we're impressive. So we get to come and admit our brokenness and say, thank God that we have Jesus and he covered all this and loves us, and that we don't have to achieve and, look impressive. Like, we're declared innocent. Isn't that great? Why don't we all sit down and have some bread and wine and celebrate this together? And that's exciting, isn't it? Very beautiful. Give me 14 seconds to refill my coffee cup, and I'll be right back. Okay, so also forgive the background noise because it's quarantine, kid chaos. And I hope to sit outside, but it was super windy. And I was like, this is going to be awful sound feedback. I want to give you guys a picture. You may have heard this analogy before, but I think it's super, super, super helpful when we think about sort of this language of humility and people moving toward Jesus. I want to give you this image here. Go back to a whiteboard. Let me clear this. And I want to give you an image of how the church has oftentimes operated like this. In, out. Okay. And so churches have so often operated in a way of, we want people who are out here to be in. And so how are they in? How do people get into the church or into the club? How's that baby work? Typically, I'm not saying what we're going for. This is not what we're going for. I'm just saying this is what people expect.
They make a profession of faith.
Okay. Pray a prayer.
Attending weekly meetings.
Weekly meetings.
Confession.
What's that?
Confession.
Confession. Okay.
People have to perform.
Oh, okay. So perform and
Performance. They have to.
yeah, yep. Performance
Works.
works. Somebody's phone's going nuts. Is that you, Charlie?
I'm muting now, bud.
Okay. What else?
Wear a suit.
Suit. Okay.
You gotta say fudge instead of the other word.
Christianese, baby.
I'd say like tithing, like giving some kind of offering.
Tithing, offering. Yep. Good. Okay.
Hanging out with the right people.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Bad company corrupts, baby. Okay. What else we got? Anything else? Okay, so basically you do these things. Oh, membership is a huge one, right? Membership. Yeah, so you have this idea of you're in. If you attend our meetings, you come to our services, you pray a prayer, you know, maybe go to the priest for confession, performance, works, deeds. If you're doing the right things, it's like a moralism, like as long as you're not drunk or sleeping around or killing people, you know, that sort of thing, right? The biggies. Then you're cool. You're good. Suit, you need to dress right. Christianese, tithing, offering, stay away from the bad people, you know, sort of stay in your Christian bubble, sort of listen to K-Love, all that kind of stuff. Membership. So you get the idea. And if not, then you're out. And really everything in this sort of mindset is like, how do we take all these like baddie people over here, like the baddies, the bad guys, and like get them to come in here to the club. And so we're gonna invite them to events, and we're gonna put on programs, and we're going to put up flyers, and we're going to try to make our music sort of cool, and do whatever we can to get people to show up to the meeting. Tell them it's not that bad. It's not what you expect. that sort of thing, in, out. But then if these people are to become a part of us, they have to sort of do all these things. There are all these expectations, and these are the insiders, and these over here are the outsiders, right? Let me give you a different metaphor that we like to use with our movement within RC. And I'll start by painting a picture of Arizona. We went as a family to Arizona, and huge, like wide open land, tons of wide open land. And these cowboys still operate like Wild West out there. Like they've got cattle that they've branded, and these cows free roam all over the place. And they can tell that they're theirs because they're branded, but they're like all over the place. And the question is, like, how do you keep your cattle from wandering too far away? Because you would think if you want to keep your animals with you, then you've got to put fences up, right? You got to put up walls, you got to put up fences to make sure that they don't leave. But there, it doesn't make sense. There's too much land. I mean, it's like wide open land. So what do you do to not lose your animals? And the cowboys would say, well, we don't put up fences. We build freshwater wells, because our animals will never go too far away from fresh water. And so rather than putting up fences, because fences can keep people in and they can keep people out, right? So instead of putting up fences, we want to build a freshwater well. And I thought, man, this is such a great analogy or picture of what the church should be. If you think of it, instead of this in and out, you think of it as Jesus is your freshwater well, right? Anyone moving toward Jesus, you celebrate. Awesome, this is great. Like, this person is moving toward Jesus. But if they're moving away, then you go, well, that's not good, because we believe Jesus is life, and that he transforms, and he's good news, and who he is and what he said is transformational. So if you have, let's say, a person who has been in the church, we'll call him like Elder Bob, right? EB, Elder Bob, and he's a leader in a church, and he goes to services every week, and he gives an offering and leads a Bible study and all of that. But let's just say that Elder Bob has this anger issue, and he's been passive aggressively ignoring his wife and children for a week because he's ticked off and loses his crap, and he's not listening to Jesus. But he's showing up at church every week, but he's not really moving toward Jesus. Let's say Elder Bob is maybe here, like in proximity to Jesus because of all of his understanding and history and all that, but he's kind of moving this way, away from Jesus. But let's just say we're going to call her like Prostitute Jane, right? Prostitute Jane hears about Jesus, and she starts to move this way, saying, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds like life. This right here, we go, oh yeah, we like that. That's great. She's moving toward Jesus. Anyone moving toward the center? Beautiful, beautiful. Elder Bob, moving this way, we go, X, no good. That's not life. That's not what we celebrate. And so we like to think of the metaphor picture of what we celebrate, sort of what we give a thumbs up to, what we get excited about, is anyone moving toward life and freedom in Jesus, and anyone moving away, we go, well, that sort of sucks. We want to pray that they find some life and hope and healing in Jesus. And so the centered set versus this bounded set with walls and fences is a big part, I think, of the culture that we want to create with our microchurches. So your thoughts and feedback to that, I'd love to hear some input on that before we move on. I think it's important culture, right? Especially because we want to engage with everyone as people that are made in the image of God that we love and value, not as insiders and outsiders, but every person is included and loved, and we want to walk with them as we walk toward Jesus. And as we do that, we're going to have people who are atheists but curious. Awesome. But then we could have people that know a lot of the Bible, but they're just being total dicks. And we go, that's not good. They're moving away from the heart of Jesus. So we want to make sure that we're celebrating the right things and not the wrong things. So your feedback to that before we move on.
But I think people are just generally, drawn to real love, to what Jesus actually is. Truth, love, humility. Those are the things that our soul actually needs, and whether people understand that or not, you're naturally drawn to that. And when you see that, you may not know what it is, the soul recognizes that and is naturally drawn to it. So I think that the idea of creating that.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating, right, Omar, that if you think of what I just drew, and then you think about the Pharisees, and then you think about the tax collectors and sinners, and you think about the ministry of Jesus, and you go, there's a certain group that was drawn to Jesus, and that we go, that's beautiful, that's great. And they were very broken people. But then you get these self-righteous religious people that created their walls and their fences. And Jesus said, Sodom and Gomorrah gets in before you. Like, what are you doing? And so there's this misunderstanding in the church world, that the Pharisee religious crowd that Jesus actually called out quite frequently.
What happens when you have both sides in the same space?
Oh, you will.
But I feel like for you, you're so good at being that middle mediator ground of just speaking truth. Whereas I would feel so I wouldn't even know what to do, how to, I already get very, and I don't know about anybody else, but when I even have family, I'm like, oh, I know how they are. They're not going to want to hang out with these people. I feel like that's a huge roadblock for me. Whereas my husband is very much we're all hanging out. Why does it matter? And I'm like, well, they're not their personalities aren't going to clash. It's just going to be weird. It's going to be awkward. I know how she is. So what do you do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'd love to hear some other people give some feedback into that or thoughts before I do, so that I don't totally take over the conversation.
As one who grew up relatively pharisaical, I can say that the best thing you can do is keep engaging those people in a loving and gracious manner, because over time, I think there are people who are like what we see in the Pharisees, where their main priority is to maintain their power, but there are also people who are just misguided as well. And so I think people who are honestly pursuing Jesus, but maybe that black and white thinking or in and out thinking, they're still doing it with a genuine desire to see people come to know the Christ that they love too. And so when we engage those people in a gracious manner, I think over time they come to see some of the things we listed out there as being errors, and they're able to change by the grace of God.
I'll contribute. My wife and I were house church planners in Sweden for 10 years. And I would love for it to be pretty cut and dry and simple. The in guys are here, the out guys are here, and stuff like that. But we had actually the out guys. We would invite them to come to our meetings, and they would provoke arguments. And actually, it got to the point one time where there was almost fisticuffs in my living room. And I literally had to stand between these two guys and just say, you know, we can't do this. If you're going to act this way, you're going to have to go home. And so they did. They both left. They stormed out of the house and everything. And we continued. One of them was our next door neighbor. And we would see him at the door quite frequently when he was coming in or going out of his apartment. And I mean, we did our best to love him and, you know, talk to him and everything. But he was just so ornery and just wanted nothing at all to do with us. And he was the one who would consider himself a Christian. The other guy was a pure atheist, but at least he knew that he was an atheist. And, you know, he admitted it. He was upfront about it. But this guy who thought he was a Christian, you know, he couldn't understand like why we were being nice to these other people. And he didn't talk to us for, well, we were there for another year and a half, and he never talked to us after that again, our neighbor. So, and like I said, we tried everything to, you know, to love him, but he just wasn't in the mood for it. So it'd be great if people responded the way we kind of assumed they would, but, you know, people are people. They're gonna do, you know, do what they want to do. So.
Yeah, it's there's a messiness to the journey that I think we need to embrace, releasing control and saying there are going to be all sorts of exciting and bizarre things that happen, which truly is adventure. And I find that oftentimes people that come from the church world like really suck at adventure. They want predictability and safety and security, and they don't do well with adventure. And I think you go on this journey. I mean, in our home, we've had the PA state director for the American Atheist hanging out with us. We had someone who became a very good friend, who was an atheist heroin addict that told us the first time she hung out at one of our parties at our house, she told us, "I will never believe in that God shit." It's the first thing she told us when she hung out at our house. And then you fast forward a couple years later, and this girl who had demon tattoos on the side of her head, her tongue split like a snake, she had rods in her back for suspensions. She brought her drug dealer into our home, and he confessed to arson during our time of confession. And she ends up telling her children, "Mommy was wrong about God not being real. God is very real." And comes to this experience of coming to belief in Jesus, says that she wants to be baptized. We baptize her in the Marysville pool. And when she comes out of the pool, she yells freedom like Braveheart. And she quotes Tupac at her baptism with a bunch of her former drug addict friends. And just amazing to see the stories and the way that God works in people's lives, but so many weird and awkward moments. I mean, I had a time where one of the guys in our group who's a little bit more prophetic, we're sitting there at a sports bar watching March Madness. And I had a couple neighbor guys with me, guys that don't share our faith. We're just hanging out watching basketball. One of my neighbor guys gets the hiccups, right? We're all sitting around the table watching the game, having a couple drinks. And this guy from our community turns, lays hands on him, and says, "In the name of Jesus, hiccups come out." And I sat there like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, I wanted to crawl under the table because it felt so weird. And then my neighbor guy started tearing up and went, "They're gone. My hiccups are gone." And then the two of them like had this like emotional like bonding moment. It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen, but I had no category for it. I'm like, okay, whatever, what do I know? And I think that we have to be comfortable with uncomfortability and weirdness, and that God's gonna work in unorthodox ways. And we just happen to love controlling things, and we love our safety and security a bit too much. And when we create environments that include all different types of people, we're going to experience all different types of things. But so did Jesus. I mean, there were times where Jesus had to call out the religiously self-righteous people and protect people who had a messy past and background, and include them as insiders, not outsiders. And he caught a lot of flack for it. I mean, they did end up, calling for his crucifixion. So I think it is one of these, Jesus says, okay, come and follow me. Foxes have holes, birds have nests. I don't have a pillow. Like, you have nowhere to sleep. And they may kill you. Who's in? Would be the best decision you ever made. And so I think there's this beauty to the journey where we go, let's go on this adventure. You're like Moana, right? Like, your heart like cries out for a greater journey and adventure. And so we have to press past the obsession with safety, security, predictability, comfort, all that sort of thing. Mission really will stretch you. It'll stretch your faith. It'll cause you to pray, because you're going to go, I don't know what to do with this. I mean, I sat once at a table with an Egyptian Muslim friend who became a good friend of Jackie and I's. We're sitting at the table at Pizza Boy, and a guy who was a part of our microchurch, who was a German man, thick German accent, but he put his faith in Jesus at this very like ultra conservative traditional church, and made this vow that he wouldn't drink alcohol, right? So we're sitting at this pub, and he's next to me, and he feels bad being a German about what the Germans did to Israel, and, comes to faith in Jesus, gets really caught up in a bunch of end times prophetic kind of stuff. And so he's wearing a yarmulke. He's wearing a yarmulke and a Star of David necklace around his neck, sitting across the table from an Egyptian Muslim. And he says to me at the table, Mike, I made this vow to God that I wouldn't drink beer when I came to faith in Jesus. But I realized that it's not a sin to drink beer. Like, I just shouldn't get drunk. So is it okay to go back on my vow? And our Egyptian Muslim friend went, well, I'm a Muslim and I drink beer. And then he looks at her and goes, oh, so you're the infamous Muslim. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? And so you end up in these like weird situations. I can't tell you how many of them we've had when you include all kinds of different people, but it's sort of the playground of discipling people and being a good friend and treating everyone like an insider. And you really do see God move. I mean, we've seen more people experience Jesus who said, I will never believe in him, in our home in a couple of years than I ever did in my life before that in church ministry. And our community has supported even one family in our microchurch this past year to the tune of $10,000 that was given out to meet those needs. We've paid off debts, given people vehicles. Our community, different people have taken people in to live with them at times. And so there is this beauty of what does it look like to actually follow Jesus that is invigorating and exciting and chilling. So your feedback to that before we move on and get into a little bit of nuts and bolts. Does that excite you, scare you?
I think it's kind of interesting because we tend to, and this has always been like my experience in previous churches that I went to, is like we kind of compartmentalize our, friendships with other people and just say like, okay, these are my Christian friends, this is my Christian family, non-Christian family. Like we tend to go directly towards these are the in people, these are the out people, and I just need to get the out people into the circle. But when you start thinking about like changing the, you know, say you're having people over to your house or you're going to another friend's house or something, it's not like, oh, I need to create this environment like specifically for my non-Christian friends so that they become Christians. And like realizing that everything should be like, everybody should be interacting all together because we're all on a journey towards Jesus, and some people are on a journey away from Jesus. We might look at the people that we see as like we would traditionally look at them and say like, oh, they're like a good Christian, they're good, they're doing the right things, you know, but this person over here is drinking and cursing and doing all of that, but they may actually be further on their journey to Jesus than the person who is doing all of the right things. So like keeping that perspective, I guess, on that everybody is on this journey, that, you know, we need to see them through the eyes of Jesus.
Yeah, I love that. And I do think that we tend to label certain sins as being the really bad ones. Like the big one is like any sort of sexual sin. That's the big one in the church world, right? That's like, ooh, we deal with that. However, greed. I mean, Jesus talked more about greed than sexuality. And I have yet to meet someone that says, I am greedy. People just aren't even aware of their greed. They compare themselves to someone that has more than them. And yet, where is the culture of generosity and meeting the needs of the people around us, and hoarding our wealth versus blessing others and that sort of thing? And we have this incredible blind spot of, we take the tree trunk out of, or we take the speck out of our brother's eye, and we don't see the tree trunk in our own eye. And I think the self-awareness is very important. But you bring up a great point, and that is, how do we, nobody likes to show up to a barbecue and then be surprised by a Bible study, right? It's called bait and switch. Nobody likes to be bait and switched. Nobody likes the idea of feeling like they're coming over for dinner and then all of a sudden you're inviting them into your business or side hustle or something, right? And so it's actually very, very frustrating. And Christians have, unfortunately, a reputation for that. That I thought we were friends, but then I very quickly realized that you're trying to like push me into your club or your, you know, church group, or get me to attend something. And so we can get very nervous about that sort of thing. So how do we engage people and include people of all different faith backgrounds, people that are interested in Jesus, not interested in Jesus, anyone in our life? And this is where we came up with this. I'll show this to you. And now we're sort of getting into some of the nuts and bolts of how a microchurch can work. But I'd love to create a little dialogue around this one. Yep. Now, all of our microchurches play with at least these 3 different environments, maybe more. But we use and kind of play with these different environments. The first is party or serve. And we found that people who anyone, I'll just say that, anyone will party with you or serve with you, typically. Go to a barbecue, run a 5K for leukemia or whatever. People want to have fun and connect and hang out on someone's porch, deck, see a band, go to a sporting event, whatever. People want to party, and people want to help other people. It's part of being created in the image of God, that I have found my friends in the community, whether they share my faith or not, are very open to partying with me or serving with me. And it's really where you start to form meaningful relationships and get to know people. So we say our microchurches, if we create environments to party and serve, a lot of people who come out of the church world just don't have many friends or don't have many friends outside of the church world. And a key thing is that we just simply become friends with people, and we create environments where we party and where we serve. And when we do that, we don't push our faith. There's no agenda outside of the fact that we're going to help so-and-so, we're going to do this project, or we're going to have this barbecue. So it's not like we're going to party and then all of a sudden we're going to go, okay, the real reason that I have you all here is Luke 4. If you would open up, people are like, what is this? What are you doing? This is so weird. So you invite someone into an environment where you're partying or serving and there's no other agenda. Now in that, we say, be yourself. If you love Jesus, don't hide that you love Jesus. Don't push an agenda. Don't try to push a conversation. Don't make it awkward. But when you're talking about things and someone's dealing with serious issues in their life, or they got a cancer diagnosis or whatever, you can ask them things like, hey, I'm a person of faith. I don't know if you are or not, but do you mind if I pray for you? So you're not pushing your faith, but you're not hiding it. So we say party or serve with people and be yourself, but no agenda. There's nothing weird. There's no bait and switch. You're not going to like suddenly make it awkward. And I'm going to skip down to VIP. We say, our microchurches, we actually want people to grow in their faith. We want people to understand the teachings of Jesus. We want people to be strategic about impacting the world. We want people to understand their gifts and how they're wired. And so we need settings for that. And so we're going to create environments where people can really grow and be challenged and process their faith and pray together and strategize how to bless the world and help other people. But how do you get someone to go from a party into an environment where we are deeply processing our faith, praying, impacting other people, or getting strategic about that? Well, you can't invite someone from a party where you have like sometimes you can, usually not, but you usually don't go from a barbecue sort of environments or that level of friendship right into, now let's share our stories deeply and pray over each other and be strategic about mission and open up the scriptures and all that kind of stuff. So we found that you have to sort of create another environment or play with another environment, and that is a table environment where you allow people to dip their feet in, ask questions, like faith night at a pub, or questions people have, or sit around a fire pit and let's get to know each other and share our stories and our past. And just so you know, I'm gonna talk about my past, which includes my faith. But you have to define the environment. People have to know what they're getting into. And I think that's very, very important. So you define the environment. We're going to party. You're just going to party. You're not going to push your faith. You're not going to hide it. You're just going to party. Or serve. Table, you define the environment. We're going to get together. And some of you guys had a question, like we were talking at the barbecue, and we all had some different opinions about why there's evil in the world. I thought some of us could get together at the pub and talk about why is there evil in the world. I'm going to share my perspectives as a follower of Jesus. You can share your perspective from whatever you believe, and we can just have some pints and talk, right? But you define the environment. And they can say, nah, I don't want to be a part of that. Or, yeah, I do want to be a part of that. But at least there's no bait and switch, because people hate that. You have to say, we're going to get together. We're going to talk about this. If you'd like to come, I thought you might be interested because when we hung out at the barbecue or when we were running the race or whatever, that subject came up. So why don't a few of us get together? We can talk about it. Got to define that environment. Now, as they show more faith interest, or you get to be better friends and you get to know each other and you get a sense that they might be interested in walking the journey with Jesus with you, you say, hey, a few of us get together at my house, or we get together at this coffee shop or pub or whatever, and we love to process our faith and think about how we can help other people and talk about the teachings of Jesus and pray for each other. If you'd like to be a part of that, we're hanging out on Friday night, right? But they know what they're getting into. It's not a bait and switch. It's not weird. It's not a surprise. And I think all of that is very important. So we play with these different environments because we find that people actually really appreciate knowing what they're getting themselves into. Now, I'd love for some dialogue and feedback around that. Is that helpful? What's clear? What's not clear? What do you like? What do you not like? Love to hear some feedback.
I actually have a question with that. Is like, how do you balance the like what we see in the Bible is you have Jesus and you have the disciples, and then like after Jesus is gone, we have the Holy Spirit, and it seems like there's just a much more sense of like urgency. Like, how do we balance that urgency with this idea of like building relationships and that like it takes time? Like, I know there's a balance there, but it seems like everybody is always either in the side of like, you need to like shove the gospel down their throats right now. Like, they need to hear this right now. You repent and believe. And then this other approach where it's like much gentler and, you know, taking it slower through the process.
Yeah, great question. My first very broad response to that is the Holy Spirit, and that's not a cop out. It's a true answer. I think people move at the Holy Spirit's pace in their life, not mine.
Say something then when you're done. I'm sorry.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, people move at the Holy Spirit's pace in their life, not mine or yours. And so if we sense that a person is open, or that God places an opportunity for us to share something that would be meaningful or challenging or impactful to that person, then we're able to share it. If we need to wait because that person is not open, they're resistant, but they're open to relationship with us, then we walk with them, but we trust the Spirit's timing, right? God does not, people move at the Holy Spirit's pace, not ours. And so some people move faster, slower. Every person's different, right? And they're open to different things at different times. So there's a sensitivity of seeing what the Spirit of God is doing in people's life and watching and listening. I think the greatest thing we can do as followers of Jesus is ask questions. Ask questions and listen and pray for people. Jesus asked over 300 questions in the New Testament, over 300 that are recorded. Many, many more actually in his ministry, but just 300 that are recorded in the New Testament. So if you think about his ministry, it was asking questions and telling stories. Is primarily what he did. Ask questions, tell stories. And I think to follow Jesus means we become curious about people. We listen to people. We try to discern what God's doing in their life. And then we share meaningfully and intelligently into what's happening at that phase of their journey. But Erica, you had something. Go for it.
Well, this is actually what you've mentioned to me several times when we've had similar questions, and I think you had mentioned it just comes down to like when you are feeling like that pressure and the sense of like you're not making enough progress with that person or whatever it is, you know, within your group, you become inauthentic. And like you had mentioned the word like you like your actions are then just driven by like a purpose versus just getting to know and love the person. So I think like it goes back to like what you just said, like listening to them, being a friend, and then like the rest will fall into place. Like you can't rush those things for like a certain agenda of wanting them to know the gospel and wanting them to be further along. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really good. And Erica, you were in our microchurch, and you remember the story of Barat, right? It's such a great example of all of that. Dale, in our conversations, Dale said, I really want to love my neighbors, and I realize that I don't know my neighbors. And I drive by them and we'll sort of wave to each other, but I haven't actually talked to these people and gotten to know their stories and about their life. And I should probably get to know these people. So Dale's driving by one day and he sees a neighbor outside. This guy Barat waves at him. His neighbor waves back, and then he says, I just felt led by the Spirit to just stop my car and ask him who he was. Say, hey, we've waved at each other a number of times. I've never introduced myself. My name's Dale. What's your name? And he said, my name's Barat. And he said, well, nice to meet you, Barat. And they, chit chat for a few minutes, and then he drove on up to his house and parked. Well, the next time he saw him outside, he knew him by name. He said, hey, Barat, how are you? Hey, Dale, good. How are you? Good. We saw each other a few more times. Then he said, I just asked Barat, why don't you join me for dinner? And Barat said, sure, I'll join you for dinner. Then he came over for dinner. They had an amazing time. They talked for hours. They had dinner. He asked all kinds of questions. Barat's from India, so he shared about, his background and being from India and his family and their beliefs and all that sort of stuff. They became really good friends. Now, in the course of that friendship, they got to talk about a number of things. And Dale introduced me to Barat. We all became friends. We're all talking and hanging out. And Barat said to us, you guys seem to be just like really obsessed with Jesus. And we never pushed Jesus on him. We just talked openly. We were ourselves, right? And we said, yeah, we really like Jesus. We think he's remarkable. I mean, we like Jesus a lot. And then he looked at us and he said this, are you trying to convert me? And we said, Barat, we would love for you to believe what we believe because we think we're right. But whether you believe what we believe or not, you're still our friend. We still want to have beers with you and lunch with you. Like, we enjoy your friendship. We're not using you. You're not a project for us. You're our friend. So even if you never believe what we believe, we still want to hang out with you and be your friend. There's no agenda. And we could see like the weight fall off of his shoulders. He just relaxed around us and he started opening up more. Well, then I'm at Pizza Boy and I see him walk in, and Dale and I are sitting there and I'm like, hey, Barat, come on over. And he comes and sits with us at this high top table at Pizza Boy. And we get into this conversation and Barat said, so let me ask you guys a question. According to your faith, your belief in Jesus, if you die and you believe in Jesus, do you go to heaven or do you go to hell, or you go to hell for a little while and then go to heaven? And we go, well, we believe that if you put your faith in Jesus, you're with Jesus. And he said, okay. So let's just say that you're a sinner, right? But you put your faith in Jesus. Do you go to heaven or hell for a little while and then go to heaven? And we're like, Barat, again, if you put your trust in Jesus, no matter what you've done, he's covered it. I mean, you're free, you're forgiven, you're loved. And he's like, but what about like a murderer, right? I mean, what about justice? What about someone who's really bad? Like, that's just not fair. And I said, well, here's the deal, Barat. We're sitting in the middle of a pizza shop, right? I said, here's the deal, Barat. Jesus loved us so much that he actually took all of the wrongness and the brokenness of humanity on himself, that instead of you being punished for your sins, he kind of bore all the evil and brokenness of humanity on himself, so that you not only could be free and forgiven, but blessed with every spiritual blessing forever. Like, you're covered, you're free. He took it for you. He covered you. And Barat looked at us in the middle of Pizza Boy and said, that's fucking nuts, really loud. And we're all like sitting there in the middle of Pizza Boy, Dale and I, with our jaws dropped, like, what? And he looked at us and he was like, what? And I said to Barat, we've just never had anyone drop the F-bomb over substitutionary atonement. That's a first for us. We've never had that. And then Barat said, I believe what you believe. He said, I believe this. And then he like started connecting even more with our microchurch. It was unbelievable. Such a great friend. But the reason I say that, Erica, is that key of like, we don't have an agenda other than we love people, and we want to share what we're enjoying with the people that we love. We would love for them to believe what we believe, because it has given us life, and we believe that it would give them life too. But whether they believe it or not, we still love them, and we're not just using them, and we're not going to cut them off. I've had so many people say, these Christians said they loved me, treated me like family, but when I didn't convert in some sort of timeline they had, they cut me off. They quit loving me. They quit spending time with me. They outed me. And I think people want to know that our love doesn't come with strings attached to it. It's very, very important. Yeah, so feedback to that.
I think one of the misconceptions that we as a church have done as a whole is we read, post Jesus New Testament, and we see how bold Peter was and how bold Paul was, and it's like, oh, we want to be like that, and we want to go out and preach and preach and preach and teach and teach and teach. It's like, this was a 60-year period that, from Jesus ascending to the end of the New Testament, and the book of Acts highlights certain, sermons and teachings that Paul and Peter did, that, in certain kind of, it's just highlights. It hits highlights of a period that was much longer. I think if we were there, and actually followed Paul on his missionary journeys, would see, it was years. Take years going to these places and building the relationships and building the communities. It wasn't this overnight thing that he did. It's like I said, it was, 30. Paul spent 30 years going around the Roman world, the Mediterranean area, making disciples. It wasn't just you go to one place and he preaches, we have this big revival, and all of a sudden, there'd be 1,000 people at this church. Although the growth of Christianity did happen, at a rapid pace, but it wasn't through just Paul going to place to place. It was like Paul would, in reality, his inner circle was just a handful of people, and then they would teach others, and then they would go from there. And it wasn't just, it wasn't like a something that happened in a 6-month period or a 3-month period or a year or two. Like we're talking 20, 30 years, and a lot of times, like we don't understand how that history unfolded like that. It's patience, right?
That's so good, man. It is you want to do it slow, small, and right. If you think about, Jesus spent every day with his disciples for 3.5 years, and still look at the doubt that was going on in those people after being with Jesus, who did it perfect and performed all sorts of miracles around them. And yet we think that people should believe what we believe and progress at a certain level very quickly when we see them a couple times a week, maybe for an hour or so here and there. It takes time and patience and walking with people, and it truly is more caught than taught. It really is. And so, I mean, think about it with families, right? If you're a parent, your kids are gonna grow and be impacted more by conversations along the way and doing projects around the house and a car ride that you go on, and it's more caught than taught. It's not like you sit them down in rows and tell them how to think. It's more along the way as you're going, which is what Jesus did with the disciples. So if we think about discipling people as we're inviting them on a journey of friendship with us, follow me as I follow Jesus, let's walk together. There are so many conversations in so many places along the way that shape and form people. So I'm with you, Omar. It was a lot of time with different groups of people, shaping, forming, patience. And I think how do you make a disciple? I mean, that's another great question. Like, what does discipleship look like, a follower of Jesus? And I think that if you think about the verse, always be prepared to give an answer to the hope that lies within you. And some of you heard me say this in message a few weeks ago, but people aren't asking Christians, like, tell me about the hope that lies within you. Your life is so radically beautiful and different and incredible. Tell me about the hope that lies within you. And people are not going to ask about the hope that lies within you because you attend church services and try to be moral. There has to be this sort of beautiful Jesus way of life that intrigues people and causes people to ask questions and say, you gotta tell me about why you do this. Like, why do you have all these people over? Why do you give of your resources in that way? And they're asking questions because the life that we're living is very countercultural. So I'll show you one more thing for today, and then hold on, let me tell my kids to be less quiet because my ADD is kicking in with YouTube videos and vlogging. So one second. Quarantine life, guys. Quarantine life. Let me show you this. And this will end our time. I'll show this to you. We'll talk about it. Where is it when you want it? Bum, bum, bum. Okay. Oh, sorry guys. Taking me a second to find it. Let me see if it's on my desktop. But while I'm doing this, I'd like to hear a little more feedback to the 3 environments that we play with. So I'll mute myself. My kids are still loud, so a little other feedback to those environments that we're playing. Or questions.
I have a question. I guess it goes with the 3rd environment. But like, what do you do, or what does it look like when people disagree on what it means to follow Jesus?
Yeah, when they, could you explain the question just a little bit more?
Sure. I mean, I guess it kind of goes back to where you're talking about like what it means to be in or out. or what it has meant in other church examples. But yeah, I guess once you're in the context of people coming together, wanting to pursue relationship with God, wanting to live a life that where they're following Jesus, what if people disagree on what that means? Like some people think you can do certain things and still be following Jesus, and some people think you can't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, let me write that one down, and we'll spend some more time on talking about what we do in the third VIP environment. We'll talk about that next week, because that's a really great and important conversation to go deep into. What does it look like to form people to become like Jesus and walk together in that deeper relationship? So yeah, that's a great, we'll really dig into that next week. I'm going to show you this. These are the rhythms that we use. And so the question was, if we are to follow Jesus today, what does it look like to follow Jesus today in our culture in a way that would cause people to ask questions, that we live a questionable life in a way that people would say, tell me about the hope that lies within you. What does it look like to follow Jesus, where we're sort of a breath of fresh air to the world around us? And so what we've come up with for our microchurches as a tool is saying, if we, when we get together, a couple of us that are walking out our faith, and process these categories of rest, eat, engage, act of love, confess, and home. And the reason that we pick these is we find in our culture this busy, go, nonstop, frantic, I'm tired, I'm busy, I'm like constantly moving and active and all that kind of stuff, that people don't rest. And a countercultural breath of fresh air is we are free to rest. Jesus has finished the work. We can slow down. We don't have to go all the time. Jesus broke away and spent 40 days alone. He took a nap on a boat. He's, got up early and got alone with the Father. And there's this rhythm of the freedom to rest and not have to produce all the time. That's very, very healthy. That if people see us retreating, resting, taking a break, and getting alone with God and having our hearts, our souls, our bodies refreshed, it's a very healthy thing. We said part of following Jesus means that we are free to rest. The next is eat, engage. If we're to follow Jesus, we're going to eat with people like Jesus did. We're going to eat with people that are irreligious, atheists, prostitutes, tax collectors, whatever the modern day equivalent is. We're going to eat with people who come from religious backgrounds. We're going to eat with everyone. We're going to be equal opportunity eaters. We're going to eat with people from every background and all different stories and share the table. We're going to engage everyone like Jesus engaged everyone. We'll be very inclusive when it comes to our tables and the type of tables that we sit around. Act of love, we're going to bless other people. We're going to actually meet needs of the people around us, care for people in their times of need, and take care of their physical problems. We're going to confess. Christians would be the chief confessors. So it's very, very countercultural to say, I am messed up, or I'm broken, or, I feel like I've dropped the ball in this area, or I feel like a failure in this way. We tend to blame everyone else and everything else instead of, admitting our own brokenness and inability. It's actually a breath of fresh air. And, healthy home life. So these are the types of things, these types of rhythms that we think will be healthy in following Jesus. We tend to, in the church world, think of following Jesus as like a Bible study, information that we acquire in our mind instead of a lifestyle that we live, where we start to experience freedom in resting. We eat and engage with people and experience community. We meet the needs of those around us. We are free to be vulnerable and confess our brokenness and problems and inabilities. And we really engage our family, and our family engages our community. And so we feel these types of rhythms are things that will cause the world around us to go, hey, tell me about why you do this, and why'd you pay that person's bill or cover this, or why did you cover our tab? We went out to eat and you covered all of our food tonight. That was really weird. Like, why'd you do that? No, I just love to do that. I love to bless people. I've been blessed. I love to be a blessing, right? So it causes people to start to ask questions about the lifestyle that we live. You got all these people that come over. Why do you do that? You know, it's so this lifestyle that we live in following Jesus, he's the center of it, but it causes people to be curious about the faith that we have. So short feedbacks to this. And again, Kelsey, I'm going to come back to that third space because that's really important. We're going to hit that next week, but feedback to the rhythms before we end.
I think one important thing, and we've talked about this before, where it's like, let's not pretend that we all got that down, right? Yeah, it's the open discussion of how do we do those things, you know, how do we get there together?
Yeah, it's less about achievement and performance, which is part of why we added confession in there. We started off with hear rhythms: home, eat, act of love, and rest. And then we realized that people could get cocky and arrogant about their following Jesus. We're like, well, we should probably put confession in there, kind of build it into the culture where we say, yeah, we're pretty broken and messed up. So it's really a conversation where you go, hey, how are you resting? And it's a reminder of, I can rest. I should take a day off. It's healthy to get alone with a book and a cup of coffee, or to take a walk, or to be free from the busyness and the chaos of life. Like, asking those questions actually moves us toward a better and healthier life in following Jesus. Who are you eating with? Okay, why do you always eat with people that are just like you, have the same political affiliation, the same color of skin? Because if we're to follow Jesus, it means we eat with everybody. So who are we eating like Jesus ate? Are we eating with people like Jesus ate with people? To follow Jesus means that we eat with the people he ate with. Act of love, right? Who are we blessing? And it's a reminder. Some of us don't naturally just share our resources and bless other people. And the very question reminds us, oh yeah, I want to do that. And the fact that you asked me reminds me to think about things that I might not be thinking about. So yeah, that's a great point, Omar. Every week, at least 3 of those things are not where they should be for me. And just the simple question itself reminds me to think about things I wasn't thinking about before, because the life of following Jesus is all of life, right? It's whether we eat or drink or whatever we do. It isn't just a certain section of our life. Any other questions or feedback before we end on that? Okay, I am going to tell you that next week we're going to talk about what we do in that VIP, which is very intentional, people, not very important. Everybody's important. Very intentional kind of space. What does it look like for us to really form people to become like Jesus? I'm also going to talk about how we grow, because people think of it as just transfer of information, but it's a number of different things. It has to include our prayer life, the rhythms that we walk in. It's got to include our gifting and callings. I find I'll talk to churches, and most of their people have no idea what their spiritual gifts are. That's the equivalent to having a sports team that nobody knows what their position is. How on earth are you going to win the game if you don't know whether you're a lineman or a receiver? That's insane, right? But if people don't even know what their gifting is and how to grow in that, so there are all these elements to what does growth look like? How does that work? So yeah, we're going to talk through our giftings. We're going to talk through what we do in our third spaces when it comes to really developing people. I'm going to give you and hand you all the tools that we have. We're going to talk about what coaching could look like in terms of, we really believe in low control and high accountability or high support. So we're not going to control you. Do whatever you want as the Spirit inspires you. Be creative, go and try and pioneer and fail 100 times, because that's how you learn. But we're going to support you, coach you, be there for you, help you, give you the tools. If we don't have the tools, we'll create them. But we want to help you be effective when it comes to mission and disciple making. So that'll be next week. Sound good? Awesome. It's helpful week one. I can send you guys all the graphics that I showed you today. I'll email you guys all that. Cool.
Yeah, I want your little drawings too, Mike.
My art is awful. Yep, Tony usually helps me whenever I do art. Good deal, guys. Great hanging with you. I feel caffeinated and inspired, and it pumps me up to think about what all of you are going to create. I'm really, Angie, you got this virtual pub thing going, which has been really cool. Michelle, I'm pumped about what you're wanting to create through your brewery up at Liquid Noise. That's really cool. Joe, Debbie, we met through this pandemic, which is super cool and awesome. And same thing with you guys, Kelsey, Tyler, really sweet. Kelsey and Fletcher, I love what you guys have done in connecting with all kinds of people through UPS and games and all kinds of good stuff. So I'm excited. It'll be fun.
Yep.
Philly crew, pumped to have you guys with us. Awesome.